We'll call this meeting of the Steuben County Planning Commission order at 5:08 p.m. So we actually have a quorum. So Clint, if you'd like to start.
Roll call. Aaron DeForest.
Here.
Steve Garman. Here. Jim Slayball.
Yes.
Landon Brown.
Here.
And President Jeff Rhodes.
Yes.
We've got a quorum. It's official.
Perfect. Thank you. So we'll skip the reading of all the preamble meeting stuff, and we'll go right into, we'll flash those slides up. Do we have any? Okay, we don't have any minutes to approve this month. Okay, which ones are we still waiting on? Do we know?
What did we approve last month? Was it August and September? So it'd be October's and November's.
Okay.
Off the top of my head.
Okay. And okay, so we'll keep working towards those. Right down the list here, report from officers. So the chairman's report. So the things that I do want to report on, they're part of the committee reports that are down below, along with some of the items that are under unfinished business. So I'll just wait for those items to do any of my reporting. Is there any questions? Are there any questions for me? Anyone? Anyone? Okay. Let's move on down to the reports from the committees. Do we have anything, Jeff, from the liaison report? Anything to report to them?
No, we meet Monday.
Oh, that would make sense. Okay. Any questions for Jeff on the liaison meetings or the liaison responsibilities? Okay. We'll move on to the drainage board. Mr. Surveyor, is there anything to report from the drainage board?
I don't believe there is at this point, no.
It's a good thing. Any questions for Surveyor Slaybaugh on the drainage board or any of its business? Okay, we'll move right on to the plat committee. Did you guys actually meet last week? Okay, I was not here. So is there anything to report from the plat committee?
Nothing out of the ordinary. Everything got approved.
Okay.
Yeah, everything.
And then I was in yesterday and I signed everything that was needed to be signed.
Yep.
Okay, good. Any questions from a plat committee standpoint? Okay. BZA.
As far as I know, we do not have a meeting on Monday, so no, we do not have anything.
Okay.
Wow.
Wow, we're moving right along. Any questions from a BZA standpoint? Okay. Let's move on to unfinished business. So we've got the first item, which is the ETJ or extraterritorial jurisdiction. How do we want to start this, Clint? So we've got.
Brandon's going to cover it as well. So I mean, you want to give a quick history background?
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping Ken would be here. I forgot that he wasn't because he usually fills me in on the dates and times we started, but I got a general.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to talk about, so from the last meeting, we approved of this board to send our draft, the interlocal agreement with regard to ETJ to the city. And I'm not sure who was all copied on the correspondence back and forth, but my quick summary of that was that, again, great work done with the help, of our friends at HPG to, put together, again, what we thought was a comprehensive draft with the idea. And yes, and you're right. So Charlie sent it over saying, hey, this is what we're throwing out there. You guys discuss, throw it back, and we'll begin this process. We got a really nice message back from Kim Shoup at the city, and about a couple hours later, we came back saying that they felt that the agreement was inappropriate and had no response or no feedback for us, not even a marked up document. So then we kind of had some options that were put together. Clint, you want to cover that, and then kind of where we were with that?
Mind me in case I forget.
Yeah.
If you want to defer to Brandon,
I would like to because he gave us the options. That was his email. So what are the options here?
Well, so I think there are a couple of options to, continue negotiation and working on the agreement. One would be to contact Kim Shoup and try to set up a call where we could discuss what some of their concerns were and give some perspective on why we took the approach that we did, which I think is the appropriate approach to, address all the issues that I think have been encountered. Another option would be to, I guess, self-edit it and try to refine it down to something, I guess, reading the tea leaves. They were expecting something simpler than what we submitted, and we could take a stab at, making those edits on our own and resending it and see if we get a response. And then, we get into more aggressive options, which would be talking about terminating the ETJ, or, is there a possibility of litigation here for, like a declaratory relief action, asking a court to just give us the answer. So I think working from maybe lowest impact to highest impact, or least aggressive and most aggressive, it would be continue to try to find a way or a path forward on the agreement all the way up to, possibly filing some sort of legal action.
Okay.
Quick question, I guess. I remember working on this thing originally back in 2011, 2012 when I was at DeKalb. It was very soon. That's what we based this on. I worked on it again. We've given them copies. I'm not saying we haven't put a lot of work into it and we haven't updated it and clarified some stuff. But from what I remember, even the layout, it mirrors Indiana code a lot.
It does.
Does it not? So that's what I didn't understand from Kim. Mr. Shoup's response was, hey, it almost sounded like he says, we didn't expect it to be this good. Seriously, that's what it kind of read to me. And I was like, it is good. I worked with it several times, but it really just mirrors the blue book to me.
And some provisions are required. So for a valid interlocal agreement, there are certain things that you have to address. And I would say a good quarter of the agreement is probably just some of those boilerplate things that come straight from the statute. In my opinion, I think were looking for something that was just focused exclusively on enforcement of, low-level development-related violations, junk accumulation, weed, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. My understanding in talking with you all over the course of the past 6 months is that the issues and some of the uncertainty is broader than that. And that's why I do think a comprehensive agreement makes sense, because they're all related to development type issues. And to, just pick and choose, outdoor storage or weed control violations is only going to scratch the surface on, where the uncertainty lies. So, for what it's worth, I think the approach was good, and I still think there's got to be some room for an agreement. But to your point, a lot of what's in there is boilerplate straight from the statute that's required.
Okay.
I mean, that's the way I've been reading it.
Yeah, any questions from the board? I mean, because
What did you get from the feeling when you guys were face to face?
Every time I get a good feeling personally. The last couple times I was like, wow, we might get this actually done today.
And then you just got slapped in the face, basically.
well, my perception of the meeting when we met with Kim and the mayor and folks were there is that Kim was, putting in more barriers, thinking that, wait a minute, we've got this, kind of worked out. And then everybody kind of went on, no, we don't have this worked out. And then that led us to say, well, we've had discussions, from the enactment from the commissioners when it was first started, down to the fact that we knew that we had a draft or something of an interlocal agreement. So that was good. So that kind of set the baseline for what we needed to do. Let's get the interlocal agreement again, so that, and Brandon kind of, I guess leveled that towards Kim and the city, and that the mayor was still in the room at that point. So I think that was good. And there was some head nods around the table. So that's, again, I agree that the interlocal agreement that we put together and that this committee, approved to move forward, it may have been over the top, but to get no edits, I don't think we should be into self-editing, our document. I don't think that that's the appropriate manner. So, so maybe this is political. I was hoping it wouldn't be political, because a couple of the options that Brandon has outlined, turn, very political. To have the commissioners rescind the ETJ, that would set us back a long way in my mind. I think that, the option is to, maybe approach, the mayor directly. And again, we can do that, in a couple of different ways, but, maybe with Rick or Ken, that we approach the mayor and say, look, we were hoping to get something marked up. So if you guys look at the whole agreement and you only want these 3 things out of it, then go ahead, edit it, redline it, bleed all over it. We don't mind, but at least then we have a discussion point, right? You can't negotiate without at least a position.
You
Right.
mentioned the mayor being there, might be more direct to Karen's question, I'm not sure, but I do remember the mayor saying before he left that it's not quite city and it's not quite county. So they didn't want to regulate it as it was dense like the city. So he wanted to give those people a little more leeway. And I think we had the understandings of once we sign this interlocal agreement and you take on certain aspects, you can enforce it however you want. We're not telling them, there's no enforcement action in there. It just says who's in charge of what.
Right.
So he was concerned that, well, it's not quite county where you got big farms, but it surely is not these little city blocks. It's kind of in between. And we don't want to go after these people the way with the cities. We might have to write some new rules or relax some stuff. And I was like, that's all you. Like, that's fine.
Well, yeah, I mean, and again, the agreement was one part of it. Then we knew that there'd have to be, kind of the bureaucracy would have to write the rules. Okay, how do we communicate? What's the phone tree for this look like? So that, when we're faced with an issue, we're not sending somebody to the county, oh, no, then to the city, oh, no, because that's what we were trying to, I guess, eliminate from the process. So, so yeah, it doesn't, the interlocal agreement doesn't, end the process. It kind of, it sets the bar. Then, the bureaucracy can figure out what the rules are and what the phone tree is and, those types of things. Okay, so any other questions or, I guess, I don't think we need to, well, I don't know. I guess I'd like to let this, stew a little bit and table because again, the 2 elected officials that are here.
I think we should let Brandon. I'm right, correct?
You're
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't want to say your wrong name. Have a conversation with Kim just to open the dialogue and see where and why they just said, nope, I'm done. And like basically close the door. I think if those 2 talk, maybe he may give something to Brandon that when everybody's all sitting there, won't get.
That's an idea. I guess.
I don't know, it's nice.
Were you on I don't remember who was on the communication. Cause the communication was like, like I said, Charlie teed it up perfectly and then it came back and then came back. I don't know. Brandon, is it the type of action that could be attorney to attorney or?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty commonly how we would, proceed as a first step would be the attorneys to get on a call and see if we can kind of get to the bottom of what some of their concerns were. And at the end of the day, it is a county and city decision that needs to be made. So I, can't make that decision for you all, just like Tim can't make that decision. He can influence and provide input. But I don't think there's any harm in having just a, friendly call. That was the first time I met Kim in person, but I thought he seemed congenial and we corresponded a couple times after that. So I'm happy. I think there's a little bit of rapport there and happy to, explore if we could get some clarity or answers on what some of their concerns were. Cause I like you, Commissioner Rose, I was expecting at least something back, not we're not going to move forward and that's it.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's got to be a reason for the shift because I thought the meeting was very productive in August and walked away feeling really encouraged that we were on the right path. And that was a surprise response. So there's probably some reason for that and just getting to the bottom of what that reason is would help us move forward, I think. And I'm happy to.
Did you get the letter?
So it was our last meeting, so at the beginning of November, and then I guess the same week, we sent the message. So within a week of our last meeting,
Last 2 or 3 weeks is when that came in.
Were you surprised by that, Jen?
No. No, I was just wondering where, when that came in and maybe why we haven't reached out. I think, I think the approach to, I know Kim, and I think the approach of maybe talking to Kim, good, that's appropriate. hopefully, he's got his boss too. And, just like we are to you.
Yep.
But, to try to find out where the sticking points are.
Yep.
Okay.
And to say absolutely not, that is a little bit surprising after I haven't had any communications with him, being out of town and stuff.
Okay. Well, I'll entertain a motion, Karen, if you want to make the recommendation, have Brandon reach out. I don't know if that requires Don, would that require, or we can just procedurally?
Yeah, it's required, just request council to.
Yep, happy to do so.
Okay, so if everybody's in agreement, or if there's anybody's got a different idea or recommendation, we can sick Jim on him.
Let's
Okay.
let Brandon do it.
Sure, put snow in his driveway.
Dump it right in.
Okay, good. Any other comments, questions about that? Okay. So I get, and that's, so I kind of jumped ahead. I look at the interlocal agreement as part of the extra, the ETJ item in our unfinished business. So we can kind of combine those two. Okay, so then before we get into new business, so did we not want to do a report on the farm feeding operation subcommittee?
We didn't have like a full report. I think you were gonna talk about like the direction, kind of what happened on the last meeting and then where you want to go moving forward or where we were thinking moving forward.
Yeah.
Not an actual report, but
So what I'm going to add to the unfinished business, just a kind of the report on the subcommittee meeting we held after our last meeting. So I guess we officially knocked it off as the farm feeding operations subcommittee that was looking to identify, as mission statement, ways to further clarify or recommend the ordinance rewrite, that would handle the claims or some of the complaints that were being fielded by the planning commission with regards to some of the farm operations in the southeast corner of the county, more specifically, right?
Yeah.
So we did. So we held the meeting after our last planning commission meeting. And we had, full participation of the folks, not only from the Concerned Citizens Group that Jake Cox represented. We had Rick Scheib from the commission or council standpoint, along with, let's see, who else was here? Leon Wagler, who represented, and then Kevin Stockwell, and Karen was there. So again, we had a great conversation with regard to just everybody presenting kind of what we felt the problem statement was that has initiated a number of the complaints that we've been getting. And from my perspective, Jake Cox and his team, they went through more, I guess, granular detail, the same presentation they made to this board in the October meeting, if everybody remembers. So the slide deck that they had, and it highlighted a lot of the studying that had been done by this group, and I guess including data from the Purdue study, some of the information that had been collected from IDEM with regard to water testing and water quality. Again, some very good detail. But as we had the discussion and people were representing, kind of, again, their background, and Karen, you feel free to, jump in. So everybody understands that, that it's, we live in a farm and, farm community with, very important resources from a water perspective. So we want to make sure that we're all protecting that. I think that after the presentations were made, the feedback that we got from Jason Army from the health department was, spot on and perfect. He talked about the granular level of all the water testing that is done, throughout the county. Not only the surface water in the lakes, but also the water table and the way that they're testing wells and the water in the wells. And then even some discussion with regard to, the aquifer. I guess that was the part that was, important, just that, there's still people that are testing the aquifer. The county isn't doing that specifically, but, we all understand that, if there's contaminants found in those areas of the water resource we have, that, yeah, we could be in trouble. But the surface water, the fact that, we test pretty consistently across the county at a 1 part per million. And there's only necessarily a concern at the health department level when it gets to 6 parts per million. And then, him giving some of the clarity that, no, we're testing it X number of times per year, this. So, we're not seeing a change in that, even as you've seen the population increase, the traffic on the lakes increase, water runoff changing because of the building and things that we're doing. So, from my perspective, it's pretty, clear that we're doing a good job. But, we don't want it to negate the fact that there are those concerns that we've got with regard to the farm operations and what they're doing with manure and those types of things. So as we tried to, keep the meeting under 2 hours, which we weren't successful with, we kept on trying to outline what the problem statement was or what we were going to try to solve. And the one open question from all of the data from the Purdue study, which again is an 8-year-old study, was that there are 17 counties in the state that have higher than state requirements in their ordinances in the way that they're written and how feeding operations are managed. So we gave, Jake Cox and his team, okay, tell us who those 17 counties are. We'll see if we can, kind of match up with them. Well, after the meeting, we found out through Jason Army that Steuben County is one of the 17 that has got more restrictive rules and ordinances around farm feeding operations and handling of those, the rules that again that were outlined there, which, I was impressed to hear that was the outcome. But so my conclusion from that is that, if we were to, try to design something in that subcommittee that would come to this board and then be presented to the commissioners, we'd have to have a lot of, I think, political capital in order to push something to make Steuben County the top number 1 out of 93 or out of 92 counties. I don't think that we've got that type of political clout at this point. And again, having, Rick and Ken sitting here, they might, say something different. But, I think, from the actions for a subcommittee, I'm going to state this openly. So if there's people watching from the subcommittee looking for what we wanted to talk about here today, I don't think that there's action for the subcommittee to take forward. Unless that, the group of concerned citizens wants to highlight again the list of complaints and take that to an elected official, AKA Rick Scheib, and write an ordinance that they feel would be appropriate. That's where, I think that's the team that's got to work. No, and I want to have it, have this as a discussion, but I don't think the subcommittee, has, again, that political clout to start writing something and putting that on our commissioners that they have to stand up to. I just don't think that that's fair to them. But again, in the ordinance writing process, any member of the community can, go to an elected official and say, help us write this, have it put on our agenda, have it, stand up to the committee, our board for, discussion, action, or whichever. And then if we make the recommendation to the commissioners, I think that's a better thing. I just don't think that, the subcommittee we had here was going to, is ever going to get to a point where we could write an ordinance that would make this group happy or satisfied. Okay. So that's kind of my report. So any questions for me?
Now that you ended it with that, I can understand what you're saying.
Okay.
So I was kind of.
Well, no, but tell me your feedback. Because we haven't really.
No, after you said that last comment, I don't think, it would be very hard to satisfy the concerned citizens. And because they want to take rules and apply it to every farmer, but every farmer hasn't done wrong.
Yeah, and I even think that we took it a step further, that it's the same complaint that keeps coming up. And it's not widespread across a bunch of farms. So it's a group of people. It's a large group of people that is making a complaint against the same farmer or same farm group. You know what I mean? And that's, again, so what that boils down to for me, and I'll editorialize here, and anybody can challenge me on this, but that's, and in the discussions I had with people that made the complaint, once you start to get down that road and say, well, we've got great ordinances here. We've got good operators here. Then it turned into a personal, kind of, finger pointing exercise. Well, they do this and they do that. Like, ooh, let's not be so, it seemed discriminatory to me, so but I appreciate their passion. And I think some of the follow-up that we received from the members of that group with regard to phosphates and, again, there's a ton of data that's out there, and we could take some action, and Clint and I have talked about it just, one-on-one, that there are some actions we could take, from the application of phosphorus and, where that's done and, and even the information that Kevin Stockwell gave to us that LaGrange does, that's just a further refining of their ordinance so that people understand, setbacks and, again, the protection, type of items. But again, I don't think that's necessarily up to us to, write an ordinance, for this group. I'd rather have them write an ordinance that they represent back through Rick Scheib and bring to this board, and then we discuss it, with the powers that be. And then again, if it has to go back to, people like Jason Army and Reba Wicker from Purdue, Purdue Extension and the Lakes, the Lakes groups. I think that's very important. We don't want to forget that, and again, some of the great information we had about that. So, so I guess my end all, it would be, we have set up for next week to have the subcommittee meet. I'd like to rescind that and say, and take back, and I can communicate back to everybody that, we've kind of hit, kind of an end capability for the subcommittee, but recommend that they work with, directly with Rick Scheib or even, the commissioners to rewrite an ordinance that then would come back to us.
Well, I think they need to figure out who's going to enforce it.
Yeah,
Because that was the biggest thing. They don't have enough employees to do the enforcement part of it.
Agree, but also at that meeting, my concern was they kept just saying the county, and I felt like they thought I was being a jerk, and that wasn't my intent. I was like, but probably 75% of what we just don't do. We do setbacks,
Right.
We do height, we do building, stuff like that. And that's the stuff that Kevin brought in, and it's pretty good, but I think, again, when you look at the way our ordinance is written, we don't have you got to be 1,000 foot off a lake. No, it doesn't say that. But it does say 1,000 foot off a residential district.
Right.
Which then you've got the 300 foot. So we've got a 13. So we far exceed even with the stuff they were bringing up. They just don't realize because we don't have a separate set of rules saying this far off a lake for a cow. But it's already in there. We already take care of it.
Right.
It's just in a different format than what they're thinking to look for. And again, I got very, I guess, uncomfortable is the only word I can really use when they kept bringing up soil testing and water testing and bringing up these other things. Like we don't do any of that. We're not qualified. We're not certified. And again, we don't have the staff.
No, but they are being done. And I think that at the end of the day, I think your subcommittee was well worth the time that you invested into it, only because it's an educational process for everybody involved. However, in my opinion, there are other resources that are being utilized to test the waters, test the soils. There's other departments, there's other people that have jurisdiction that are enforcing that. And to be quite honest with you, if this were a large scale issue that we were constantly having massive problems with, I think we would then want to address it and to your point, go down the road of looking to write a more descriptive ordinance or more restrictive ordinance. But at this point, I feel like we're spending a lot of time and a lot of resources on a few bad apples that, eventually will work their way out. And the state's regulated this. The health department's regulating this. If we had neighbors of these farmers getting deathly sick and we were testing their wells and finding that they had E. coli issues or other issues that were directly related to those farms, I think that would be more valid at this point. But I think we're kind of grasping the straw saying, well, I don't like it. And here's some skewed data that I can present to you from several years ago. I just think that we're wasting valuable time on invalid complaints, to be quite honest.
No, great point, Landon. Yeah.
If I can add to that too, on the surveyor's side thing, I want to say it. We are working with IDEM. We are working with the Army Corps of Engineers. We are working with DNR, Fish and Wildlife on a potential violation. So, I mean, we're all over that. You know what I'm saying? So it's an isolated incident. And I think, again, it's good what both of you said about that, but we need to go with the facts and not sell our opinions as facts to get going. So.
Yeah, well, and which is another, and I guess even during the meeting, when, the process was outlined that, well, if you run into that complaint, IDEM. And they're like, oh, no, IDEM doesn't do that. I mean,
do.
but IDEM, I think that there's pretty broad agreement that, IDEM is on it. They don't let things, go and, there's not complaints there. But, if there is, I mean, there's a governance associated with IDEM. So if IDEM doesn't do their job, you can go to, the governor's office and, they'll go after IDEM.
Well, but I think the issue is that IDEM will only research it has to be a valid complaint, it has to be a valid concern, right? And so if they're looking at these and they're not valid complaints and they don't have legitimate factual data to support it, and it gets thrown out, the answer is, well, we didn't get the answer that we like, so we're going to go someplace else, which is, I think we've circled back to where we're at now, where they don't like the answers that they're getting from other entities that are designed to do those types of things. And so now it's being thrown back in the Plan Commission's board. And to Clint's response, look, our ordinances far exceed the regulations that we really would have to do. So we're going above and beyond as it is now. So we've kind of just come into this big circle, and I just don't see the point of, subcommittee, I'm not trying to tell you to cancel your subcommittee, but if you're at a point where you don't think you can make any more headway, then I would agree with your position as to let's forego the subcommittee continuing and move on to other things that we have to.
Yeah, no, and thanks again. Which is, I guess I wasn't trying to lobby our position, but, just trying to make the steps through what we had initiated it for. And, so that makes sense. So I guess I will, I'll take action, work with, Charlie and Clint to make sure we communicate that, but I'll reach out to folks as well. I don't want to, disappoint anybody that, but I think we've got sound logic with it. And again, if they don't like our answer, they can, take it up with their elected officials. Okay. Everybody work with that? Any more questions? Okay, good. So we'll move on to new business. And we've got, a couple of folks who come up all the way from Fort Wayne. So we want to make sure we give them a good audience, and this gets recorded. You guys do this, we're doing live meetings now, so
Well, that's the update.
it'll be there. It'll be on the internet forever.
Ryan, no pressure. Everyone's seeing this, the entire world.
I know, okay. Good, they wanted to.
It's on YouTube, dude.
Yeah, it's on YouTube, okay.
We're big news now.
We're big time.
Don't be disappointed when you see the number of views.
Are you kidding? I was sending it out to everybody. Just take a look at it. 35 seconds is all I need. So we had a lot of views.
Very good. Awesome. Well, thanks for having us back. Appreciate it. Ryan Chasey with now Club 720 Development Corporation, formerly the HPG Network, and Brandon Almas. We're glad to join you again. I think, here we are at the end of the year already. It seems like we were just here, in the spring when we were talking about this project, but the time has gone fast and we've got a lot of good things to report, most of which you're already aware of and have seen drafts, and we've already discussed some of this tonight. But Clint and Charlie had asked me to come back and take a step back to, again, before we just cover the ground of what has been accomplished this year, to also just review how we reached this point and how these items were the ones that were selected to work on this year. So I'm going to review some of the same slides I did before, but I'll go through these pretty briefly. But, this is we've called this the strategic assessment and alignment process. And so this is really the last phase of that, which is now focused on, updating the ordinances. This was the stated goal at the outset when we started this back in 2020, which was that all the departments involved in the development process would have documented, aligned processes with roles where gaps and overlap between the departments were eliminated. And so I think it's really important to remember that goal when we're now talking about these ordinance updates, because this is the capstone of a long road that we've been in order to reach that point. And honestly, a very, very commendable path that we have taken. It's amazing to me that this first phase started in 2020. That seems like another lifetime ago, just in terms of what all has, changed in the world in that time. But, routinely when I'm asked about, process improvement and permitting, I always cite you and this process because it's been so methodical and because of, the diligence that you've undertaken this over a long period of time, not just, trying to make a big splash in some way. So we had the first phase in 2020, which was the assessment. And then, we're in the midst at the end of the second phase, which is the alignment. And so just a brief recap on, where we started back in January of 2020. The stakeholder group determined that there were 4 primary customer needs of why we were undertaking this process. And these are listed by the order from the largest gap from current performance, so the most opportunity for improvement, down to the smallest opportunity for improvement. These were the top 4 of many others that were listed. So roles, guidelines, and ordinances being number 1. Communication and coordination being number 2, drainage being number 3, and documentation being number 4. And I think all of those are things that we have addressed over the course of this project and in the subsequent work that has followed. So in March of 2020, we created this current state process map that the departments used to document how things were working right then. We color coded it by department. We identified out of this some of the steps and opportunities for improvement. I think one of the main takeaways from this was just a reaffirmation that from a customer standpoint, this is a complicated process. This is something that is, as we look at that as a map, probably not readily easy to be understood by folks that are not using the system on a regular basis. So in September, we determined which are the outcomes of this process that the customers care the most about. And these are the 5 that came out of that. So clarity, transparency, accuracy, communication, speed, and then ultimately approval. Those are the 4 things that are going to dictate if a customer is satisfied with the process that they go through or not. So in understanding those things, we used a tool called a cause and effect matrix, a process improvement tool, to look at what are all the inputs into this process and how do we prioritize which of those have the greatest impact on the things that customers care most about. And I'll save you from straining your eyes here by just on the next slide, highlighting what the top 7 were. And so you'll see a lot of these were forms, applications, documents, and customer inputs. Those are the 2 main categories of things that were the most key process inputs. So having that information in 2020, that was a lot of information, led us to, I believe there's 5 recommendations. And the first of those was that we comprehensively update the governing ordinances to ensure that they're aligned and accurate. With the caveat that while this is the first recommendation, it should probably be the last recommendation to actually occur, because we don't want to jump in and update a bunch of ordinances when their foundation of those are processes that still could be improved at the departmental level. And so the other recommendation was that department-led efforts to update the forms and update the policies, the things that are within their control, that we saw a number of those on that input list, should be done. The other recommendation is that technology should be enhanced to support the development process. This is also something that's been done since. Commissioner leadership we identified was vital to ensure that all the agencies were fulfilling their roles, and that there were not gaps in buy-in from that. And then we identified that coordination with non-county led agencies was going to be essential. So that was a step that Clint has really championed, the communication and the interaction with those agencies. I've met with a number of them different times throughout this process.
And then improved customer education on the process and requirements. So we talked in that list of inputs, you saw there were a lot of things that customers bring to the table. That was a key variable. So how do we try to set the expectation of what they need to do in order to make our process work more smoothly? I've not highlighted, because I think I have in the past, all the individual bullet points under these, but those were the main recommendations. So when we then that was the assessment piece, and we moved into alignment in 2022. And we started, so there was a gap in there from 20 to 22. During that time, the departments did a lot of work on that. And so we started in 22 by having the departments provide updates on what they had changed, what was different on the forms, what processes had been improved, and then things that they still viewed as process challenges that they either hadn't gotten to, had changed or become problems since. The sum of that was that we showed that those were about all the quick wins that we could have hoped for and expected. The departments took on, and that the remaining things were going to be larger, more costly, and difficult to implement. And that was good, because eventually we needed to get to those, but we didn't want to do that until we had that foundation. So we did a tool called an action workout, where we kind of, everybody had all the list of things that remained. And we went through this exercise and came up with what are things that would make a big impact on the process that are outside our control that we need to do. And so online permitting and payment, utilization of SmartGov, which had been implemented, and then ordinances were really the three main things that came out of that. And that was very affirming to know that there had been so much progress on that, and that we were now really working on these bigger picture things. So, summer of 23, they reviewed the process map. They determined we didn't need to update that process map, but they did identify this list of ordinances as the highest priority for updates. And these that were updates that had recently been made to ordinances. Again, this was in the summer of 23. So that led us to where we were this year when I came back in March and reviewed this, to say, we are going to do a review of this ordinance update prioritization and then work on that. We introduced Brandon Almus from Barrett McNagny to this process to really lead that from a legal standpoint, understanding the framework that this had all been done in, and making sure that we're trying to hit the mark. So I'm going to turn it over to Brandon to talk about the work that's been completed this year, and then happy to field any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate everyone's time this evening, and happy to provide an update on where we're at here as we end 2024 and what we will be looking to accomplish in 2025. So when we were brought in back in March, I believe, initially, one of the first things that we wanted to do was identify what the pain points were and what the priorities that the group that's been involved in the assessment and the preliminary alignment phases identified, and just see what's out there. See what ordinances are already on the books, where those may be deficient or maybe in need of some refining, and then see what the actual issues are that the stakeholders have been encountering and whether the ordinances that are on the books address those. So the first thing that we did when we got involved was we met with Clint and Charlie and several of the stakeholders, representative from the Board of Health. I think Mr. Slayball was there, traffic engineer, if I recall correctly, and then Clint's brother. And we just kind of talked through some of the issues that all of the stakeholders have been encountering. What we found is a lot of the work that's been done over the past years, and some of the ordinances that are in place right now are pretty good. The zoning ordinance itself is pretty good, and I think is consistent with what we would expect to see for a community like this, with some minor adjustments, but we didn't see any wholesale revisions or updates that were required. Same thing with subdivision control, septic. A lot of those we found, recent changes had already been initiated by the various department heads. So many of these ordinances were in a pretty good place already as we were coming in. A few that we knew we would need to address, stormwater and erosion control, which was a big priority identified in the assessment phase. Figuring out a way to address the ETJ area, which we touched on this evening already, and can touch on some more, and then flood control. And one of the things that we found is that there are different ordinances on the books in different sections of the county code, and wanting to ensure that those were consistent with each other, and if not, or even if they are, finding a way to clean things up. So there's really only one place to go. If you've got a flood control ordinance, you should be able to go to that flood control ordinance and know that there's nothing else out there that might impact something that you would want to do in a floodplain. So I think after that first meeting, we sort of refined our scope somewhat and really started to focus in on some of the high priority issues and the ones that Ryan has up here on the screen. So the stormwater ordinance, there is an ordinance 73, I believe, on the books. It's not as comprehensive as what we typically see. And I think maybe the county recognized that because prior to my involvement, Christopher Burke Engineering was consulted, and he provided a draft of a new form of stormwater ordinance that is very comprehensive and is consistent with what we see in other communities. So we drilled into that, and that stormwater ordinance, there's kind of a two-part process or two-part deliverable. You've got the ordinance itself that kind of outlines what the rules are, and then you've got the technical standards that I think really drill into, what quantity of water is acceptable and how's that calculated. Stuff that is above my pay grade and we leave to the engineers, but it's important in carrying out or aligning with the terms of the ordinance. So these are big documents, and we spent quite a bit of time tailoring what I think was a standardized form of ordinance that we received from Christopher Burke's group, and trying to make it meet the needs of the community. So there are several examples on where the form that was presented doesn't quite align with the specific needs of Steuben County, but just a couple of highlights. Number one, Steuben County is not a phase 2 entity, and that ordinance was clearly written for phase 2 under the MPDS system of permitting. It was written for phase 2 entities. So we wanted to make sure that we were putting regulations in place, but not holding Steuben County to a standard that it's not legally required to be held to. There's also, when it comes to erosion control and development, what size of lot triggers certain requirements. And in Indiana, the standard is if you're disturbing more than an acre of land, that requires a SWIP and an erosion control plan. The way this draft was originally written, it was much smaller than that. And in talking with the stakeholders, primarily, I think the surveyor's office, we didn't feel that lower threshold would really reflect the needs of the community. So adjusting things like that to, I think, align with the community's resources, the community's concerns, the community's needs, that was a big focus of some of our revisions to those documents. So where we stand on that now, we have marked those documents up. Like I said, they're large documents, so it does take time to kind of work through them. And I think Greg is kind of chewing on what some of the proposed changes that we suggested are. And I think that will be a task that we would look forward to completing in 2025 would be my expectation. Related to that, we, and kind of piggybacking off what Ryan talked about, forms and process alignment. So creating a simple form that people can fill out and submit to the surveyor's office when they've got a development project and they, know what fees are going to be required. That's been a work in process. I think there's been a draft circulated that really looked pretty good, to be quite honest, comprehensive, and I think address recovery of fees and some of the administrative expense that's associated with review of those plans. So that will be something that I would envision being rolled out once we have a finalized ordinance that's ready to be approved. Before I move on to ETJ, any questions or comments about stormwater erosion control?
So, yeah, and I guess the stormwater, and, cause I made the note here, cause we haven't segregated stormwater, but it's stormwater and erosion control. And then they addressed everything that you brought to that. But
as far as,
just, I mean, well, cause I don't want to get on this rat hole, but but, you know, maintenance of drains. and
oh,
things like that,
absolutely.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, you know, we know the process you're going through and
Mhm.
having to do reassessments.
Correct. Yeah.
Does this process help you then?
I think it maybe, does it help me? It definitely clarifies things, if I can say that. So, yeah, you know. But most of the, you know, as far as most of the work that I'm doing too, though, is, you know, we're out in the middle of the field, you know what I'm saying? So,
Well,
so
yeah,
some of that stuff doesn't happen as far as, well, you know, as far as silt fence or something like that, that doesn't really apply when we're out, you know.
yeah, I mean, because that's not the part that, you know, myself personally, I ever see. I see it when it's, you know, stormwater running down the street towards his lake. And,
Right,
you know,
yeah.
You know, hitting a drain or not hitting a
Right,
drain and things like
right.
that. So,
Yeah.
you know, and we've seen that too in our site visits when, you know, people are putting more blacktop or cement, you know, that's
Mhm.
changing the flow of water and things like that. So, and like I said, we've been trying to, you know, do that page turning exercise with this board, you know, on the stormwater and erosion control, you know, I guess, edit or the, you know, that document, you know, not to your guys' fault. We keep on getting things that pushes it, you know, further out. But we did, you probably heard that we did pass the pond ordinance,
Mhm.
you know, which is small, but it was a great way to cut our teeth, you know, and got that approved and it's, you know, now it's moving on to the commissioner. So, yeah, I guess I would like to see us get more of the things off our plate that way.
You know, and I was glad to see that.
Like it's the first step. But again, yeah, this one is a, you know, that was a one pager, you know, a few paragraphs. The stormwater erosion control is 60 pages.
Yep,
So,
yep.
you know, but it's, yeah, so as soon as we have something that can be, you know, again, you know, people that do a page, you know, do their own page turning exercise so that we can do that here to get it approved and done. I think that's an important goal for us. So, yeah, I mean, and that would make us meet up with the investment we've made here, right? We made a big investment. We want to keep making sure we get something out of it.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so good. Any other questions before we move to the ETJ? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so we've touched on ETJ this evening already, but, you know, our focus was where are there gaps in the ordinance and what is the best way to address those gaps? I mean, you're all aware of what the challenge is. The city has zoning authority over the ETJ area, and what exactly does that mean? How far does that extend? You know, I think that's just one of those questions that we were hoping we could shore up in that meeting with representatives from the city, and felt like, you know, we made a lot of progress. You know, my thought is there's still room for negotiation and finalizing that interlocal agreement. And the purpose of that is to, I think, really crystallize what the county and what the city are responsible for. Who, if somebody has an issue within the ETJ area, who do they need to contact? So I think that's a working process, but I think it's a necessary and worthwhile endeavor to keep at that and see if we can get something finalized with the city. I mean, I'm optimistic that we'll be able to come to some form of agreement. It's just a matter of scope. And I think, you know, as we talked about earlier, the scope that we presented is, you know, what makes sense and what's appropriate given the issues that have been encountered. So, you know, in my opinion, that's the way to address the ETJ, short of terminating the ETJ. And then it's clear, you know, the county's responsible, which creates its own problems. The other way to clarify that is have an agreement. The parties acknowledge that, you know, here's where your responsibilities end and where ours begin. And all of the issues that we encapsulated in that interlocal agreement are issues that stem from or are related to zoning and development. So it does make sense that, you know, if the city's going to assume some responsibilities, that they would also, the breadth of their responsibilities would include the other things that we've identified, with certain exceptions. And one of those is stormwater and drainage. And part of the reason for that is the city itself is a phase 2 entity. So they are limited to their municipal boundaries. So they will not operate outside of their corporate boundaries for stormwater and erosion control purposes. But we also need to have communication and coordination when there's development projects within the ETJ or issues that are being encountered in the ETJ, and making sure that it's clear. And I think that agreement did a good job of, identifying when things need to be routed to the surveyor's office for review and consideration. So I continue to think that is probably the path to resolving some of the challenges that have been encountered in the ETJ, and I look forward to having further conversations with Mr. Shoup and representatives from the city to work on those.
So I guess a couple of questions that we had in talking with Charlie and Clint. So with the ETJ, is there a tax revenue component that we're not really involved with at this point, or should we be involved with it at some point?
I think that the tax revenue is still coming back to the county and the ETJ area. So I'm not aware of this.
Wouldn't make any difference.
Yeah.
Because the city is just on top of the county anyway, so.
But if they're collecting it, does that go into their coffer?
I don't think they're collecting tax revenue in the ETJ
I
area.
don't think they are, but even if they were, they would get their tax, so the county would get their.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're right. So whatever services are being provided in that area, then, so then the components are there.
I think what it is they get the money for the permits and
Right.
those,
Sure,
that
sure.
kind of
Yes.
revenue, not the tax.
Well, and I guess
It's a layer of the tax. You pay county taxes like everybody else. The city just has a layer of tax on top of that for their streets and.
Right.
Yep.
So on and so forth.
Yep.
And I mean, and some of the defining factors of that, is that, when there's a controversy, in the ETJ, it falls to us, and I guess the example we had, when they wanted to, maintain a gravel pit and make it an asphalt, operation, oh no. But then, when there's, still within the same, mile radius, there's a new business that they put up that, is nice, a nice shiny new penny that everybody's, wanting to, highlight.
Mhm.
That seems to be, a sticking point. It's like, wait a minute, shouldn't it be all all the same or treated the same?
Yeah.
Or at least that would be, I mean, me as a taxpayer, that's what I would expect or hope for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. Any other questions about that? Okay. And I was gonna ask a question about, so phase 2 would just, I couldn't remember, phase 2 just meant more of an urban area.
Yep. You have to meet certain density requirements in order to qualify as a phase 2. And I think here in Steuben County, it's the university and the Angola are the only two that are actually phase 2 entities. So they do fall under the EPA's NPDES system. They're permitted entities and they've got requirements within their MS4 boundaries that they have to meet.
You said Tryon and who else?
The city of Angola.
Oh, just the city?
Yep, just the city.
As a whole.
Yep.
Yeah, we had some experience with was it the MP3 or MP4?
Before, I think, right?
Then again, that's just the same thing that we do from erosion control, but it's
Combined.
the phase or the phase 2 entities that have to fall under that.
Or phase 1, yeah. But I think, most other than Fort Wayne and Indianapolis and Indiana, just the density limitations, most.
MS.
Yeah, MS4. Municipal separate storm system.
An acronym for something.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, most entities that fall under that regulatory framework are phase 2 here in Indiana. But a lot of, rural areas here in Northeast Indiana and across the state aren't under that framework at all. They just don't meet the density requirements. So, and that's where Steuben County is. And I don't think it makes sense to subject yourself to a regulatory framework that you're not required to be subjected to. But at the same time, you still want local regulations in place that will address the issues that so that's been the process with the stormwater ordinances. How can we put a framework in place that works for the community, but isn't exposing the community or the people that are going to be in charge of enforcing this to, regulations that are beyond what they're otherwise required to.
Yeah, I know the EPA likes to follow their money, right? So we're, okay, good.
Yeah.
This is good information. So, any other questions, or we can move on?
And just real briefly, flood control ordinance, there is a flood control ordinance that's kind of incorporated into the zoning ordinance that's actually pretty good. There's also an old flood control ordinance on the books, chapter 156 of the county code. So I think looking to clean that up and, possibly repealing the older version. So again, getting to that point where we've only got one place to look for these answers when there's a question. That would be something that I would suggest we try to accomplish in 2025 as well.
And that was the same, with Rick's, the complaint that we raised, they were flipping between two sections of the book, right? Would this clear that up?
That is the overall 2025 goal, as I understand it. That's
Okay.
what we're trying to do this year.
Okay.
Or next year, I guess.
Before the end of 2025.
Yes.
Well, I mean, but, again, I'm not saying that was the root of, the discussions we've had. But it would just, make it so that people wouldn't have to page back and forth. And they're saying, well, it doesn't make sense here. But it's the same cross-reference. And we talked about, having in the pond ordinance, you have to make sure that we've got the right cross-reference to clear that up.
And that's that's the job. That's what we do every day to make sure that we're not looking in the wrong section, enforcing the wrong rules, staying consistent. That's because going back and forth. My goal, as I stated to Ryan, especially all along since at least 2020, or probably even before, is I would love somebody to come in, and I'll just use a house as an example or a shed, and just go like, here's 3 pages of the book, go to town. There's a little more to it than that, but I would love it to be that simple. Right now, like you said, okay, make you a copy of this page and make you a copy of this. Yeah, so.
No, and then if they get a different answer, then it turns into a complaint.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
That happens.
It's fast.
That's part of what I see in this, is that making it so you guys are, have an efficient operation. I don't even want to talk about SmartGov at this point, but, just having it so that your workflow is understood by people.
Since you brought it up, a lot of the stuff Ryan put up in his slides, and I know it's a couple of years old, you can check those off. SmartGov, online permits, online payments, we've done.
You take cards now,
It's-
pond ordinance was part of that. Trying to think, there was one more thing that I saw, but.
So, we would call a lot of the stuff early on low hanging fruit, and we got that instantly. We had great, Jason's help, Chip's help, like I said, Highway, the Health Department, Jim and Greg, working with us at Building and Planning. We got a lot of that low hanging fruit done. And then in that meantime, while we've been working on all this and other stuff, we've also brought all those other things online and stuff that was a little bit more costly. It took other departments to get involved, and a lot of that's done as well. So.
But not everybody's on SmartGov in the county yet. Okay, well, good. So again, you guys are.
Well, we don't collect that. We don't collect any other fees other than just the drainage.
Yeah, but it's not SmartGov, not just from a fees perspective, though, right?
No, But we do have the contract so everybody can come online. So we've got a big blanket, what do they call it? There's a word for it.
Like a corporate account, but.
So instead of buying like a couple different licenses, anybody in the county now can come under that one umbrella. So every office could use it as they see fit and interconnect with us.
Stuff for the waste.
Well,
Yeah, they chose to go with a different program, I think.
You get like efficiency.
Yes.
Okay. Anyways, no, but I think the short of it is that, they're earning what we're paying them,
Oh, yeah.
right?
I think so.
We didn't sign off on it, but, we reap the benefit of what the county has paid for. So that's good. Okay.
Just one quick question that I have, and only because I missed the initiation of this whole process, but do we have an end date? Or is there, I know a lot of this we started in 2020, right? We've got a lot done in this last, say, 12 to 24 months. Is the anticipation to be completed by the end of 2025? Or are we looking at 2026?
I would say we're probably looking at 2026 and beyond in general, because I think this process can go deeper. But I think as far as updating the ordinance of what we set out for these 2 years, but big ones, but we had a third or fourth. Yeah,
2 years for.
We should be wrapped up at the end of this year.
But yeah,
I can see
the contract The contract it ends in 2025.
Yes, it ends this year, so we have to have a new contract, do other stuff, but I could see it going, even with the ETJ, as we talked with the city, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they were talking about, there are basically sections that, again, this is a horrible way to state it, I'm putting words in their mouth, but they're really not, they have no interest in some of the stuff out northeast, that's not going to develop, that's more residential, that's more rural. So they were talking about maybe redrawing some maps on something like that, which would require some zoning updates, the actual coloring of the. Again, I haven't talked to these guys about that, but I think if we did that, I think we would need some outside help navigating those waters. And I mean, and I still see that as being something tied to this, but separate from what we've contracted so far. Did I say that right?
But essentially, phase two, the short-term goal, and I'll say short-term being 12 months, is to complete phase two by the end of 2025.
That's right, yes. Yep.
I'm sure you guys love change orders, so the commissioners will recommend to the council and those things, right? Okay, good. So what else do we have?
That is all that I've got. Any questions or other comments, discussion?
Landon's question was the only one, mine. It's like, how much more do we have to accomplish? But I think it's pretty well outlined.
Well, and I guess we're just one more. So because we're taking these ordinances and we're sending recommendations to the commissioners for final approval. So I mean, is it really November that we're wanting to be done?
So that'll lead to 2026.
Right. So we just want, as far as having our draft that we're presenting to the commissioners, for this board, is to be completed with that.
Because that can take on a life of its own, because they either have to up it or down it, and they would have to send it back to us to rework it. They can't make corrections and then send it back to us at that point. So that can take on a life of its own, but as long as we have the draft to send to them. And then again, the biggest thing for me, and it may not be the biggest thing for you, and you guys have the vote, but the biggest thing to me would be probably the format and all that other stuff. So if there's any little details of, we want a 6-foot setback instead of 5, they don't need to be involved in that. And that's just part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, and even, so the way we approved the pond ordinance was, the way that it would come in the book, but Charlie had to rewrite it to submit it to the commissioners. So it's in the.
Like an ordinance amendment format.
Yeah.
And there will be fees and penalties down. So we're going to have to advertise and re-advertise. And
That's true.
So it'll go well into 2026. I have a feeling, even when this group's done.
And one question, then that was in that same time frame that we first started looking at that fee structure matrix, right?
We updated that.
Yep.
And that was all approved then, even with some of the
The CCC formula?
Yes.
Yes.
That's the specific side. The same thing that with the pond ordinance, it has to be in like a resolution format. And I talked to the auditor's office and I couldn't get a copy of the old, the 2016 when we last changed them. But I actually, in going through the pond ordinance to try to make that amendment for the pond ordinance, I found the last time we presented the fees to them on the planning side. So that is going to go at the same time with the pond ordinance. But the building side, I got that with the auditor's office a couple months ago. So that's already in place as far as your CCC forms and everything like that. But the planning resolution or the amendment to change those fees, that'll be coming with the pond ordinance.
Good. And again, just to seeing how all those pieces fit together once we do the rewrite. And then if it outlines in our rewrite that there's fee changes, that does. Okay, so that's part of that process. Okay, good.
So this may be a Don question. As the rewrites come through, do we still have the grandfathered?
There'll be a non-conforming section, absolutely.
So, I mean, anybody that's currently non-conforming for any of the ordinances that we rewrite, they're not going to have to, okay.
Typically how that works is when they come to update, like right now, if you're too close to the road, you can add a second story, but no bump out, no closer to the road. You can go straight up.
And that's recent too.
That's recent too. So yeah, we've done a lot of stuff recently. So
Without going through the variance process.
without going through the various process, yes. So yeah, the non-conforming clause, I mean, I don't think we've had any complaints or issues. I mean, other than we've updated it recently last year.
Yeah, no complaint.
We haven't had any issues with it. So, I mean, that's one of the things that'll probably remain relatively untouched, and that's pretty common standard across the board.
Be some different clarification on different things, but that'd be it.
Good. So a good process. We just need to finish it. Okay.
And that's why I have a consultant to keep us on task.
They do a very good job at that.
Right, they're crapping whip. You should see what they do behind the scenes. Yelling at them all the time.
He's got bruises.
Okay, good. Well, thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
So that wraps up the agenda. We can move on to announcements. Are there any announcements? None? I'll just say, because we won't meet until after the new year, so Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to everybody. Can't believe it. We need more snow on the ground for me to feel that way.
Good morning. Yeah, no kidding.
I
We
guess,
think.
I guess I have a question.
Okay.
Because I know I'm gonna see this concerned citizens group
Okay.
on Saturday for the Lakes Council's meeting.
Would you like me to come to that?
If you would like.
I mean, I don't.
I'm just wondering when you guys are going to approach them and tell them, so then I'm not sitting there at the meeting running it and I get it.
Just pretty quick, that's what I can say.
I get taken out, you know?
He's usually on it, so I would meet with him tomorrow or the next day, right?
Yeah, no, before next week, but no,
Okay.
if that's more appropriate than me doing an email.
No, I mean, I don't mind you doing an email. I just
Prior to
wanted to be
Saturday.
prepared, so when I'm standing there Saturday, that these people don't come in and go
But no, I
point
don't
and
mind
say
stating
a
this.
few choice things that
No, I
we
mean,
may not want to hear.
well, let's talk about that. I wouldn't mind, being at that meeting on Saturday to just,
You can even Zoom in, because we have a Zoom, or you can come in.
yeah, no,
It doesn't
I'm
matter.
here. I mean, if
And
it's in the
that's at
morning,
Steuben County.
The foundation building.
okay, well, we'll talk, let's talk, I mean, if you need to make a formal invitation for me to that, or if I need to be on the agenda, I think that's a great way to describe the subcommittee.
Mhm.
And I don't mind giving the recommendation as far as, okay, I don't want to do this, but other people can.
Right.
Right.
I don't know if I'd use that terminology.
Right, yes, that's where I'm I just wanted to make sure that I would know before the meeting, so I'm not caught off guard that they got an email and then they're
Well,
mad.
Yeah, no, let's strategize, because I can be at the meeting and then follow up the email before, because, letting, the rest of the subcommittee know that
Right,
we've closed the
Right.
loop on it. Okay, good.
Could you send out a new calendar dates of meetings?
Yeah.
2025.
We can't just wait till after the January meeting.
yeah.
Yeah,
So we approve it on it first,
We approve it on the
January, then we can send it out.
So the January meeting is on New Year's Day.
No, it's
January 8th.
The calendar, it's the.
It's 8?
Yeah,
It will be the week after because the building is closed.
it's in the schedule now.
Yeah, that January's is scheduled from this January. So that will be.
I just want to make sure I'm correct.
You sent out the proposed.
Yeah.
We'll get that out this month, yes,
Yeah, that's the
absolutely.
plan.
I think it's already done, isn't it?
I believe so.
I know we sat down on my desk and went over it, crossed stuff off. I don't remember what form it's in right now, but it's basically done. It's ready to go.
At the January 8th meeting, we will approve that schedule. So yeah, if you've got it now, then everybody can just kind of, and then if we've
Yeah, we
got
can
questions
send it out to
as far as
everybody.
when those line up, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Nice. Any other announcements? Okay, motion to adjourn. So
Go
moved,
ahead.
seconded.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. We're done. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. That's fun seeing you. I don't see you that much anymore. You used to see you all the time. We don't go to the.
Yeah, it's on right now.
I might go to stuff. I could order 120, whatever, the breakfast.
I think our problem is like, if you send them emails.
But the thing is, it's
Which ones I do that? I think it's important to start copies of the Lansing. They're paying a phone.
I think it's important we present whatever we're going to send to the counties that are
correct.